We received a story from a viewer that honestly left our entire team speechless. A 36-year-old woman named Monica came home for what she thought was a routine family meeting about her late father's trust fund, $12 million she was supposed to inherit at age 40. Her stepmother, a former attorney, had everything prepared, lawyers' documents, even coffee served by Monica's own mother. But when the housekeeper accidentally knocked the cup from Monica's hand and whispered two words, "Don't drink," Monica made a choice that saved her life. 3 hours later, blood tests confirmed the coffee contained drugs designed to make her compliant enough to sign away everything. That's when Monica realized this wasn't the first time her stepmother had done this. 10 years earlier, her aunt died under eerily similar circumstances, drugged pressured to sign documents, then found dead in a bathtub. Now Monica was next in line. But here's what her stepmother didn't anticipate. Monica wasn't going to be another victim who disappeared quietly. What happened next turned into a legal war that exposed a 30-year pattern of trust fraud, multiple victims, and a predator who'd been using the law itself as a weapon. This is Monica's story, told in her own words, about the day a spilled cup of coffee revealed that the most dangerous betrayals don't come with violence. They come with paperwork and a smile. Because when Monica walked into that emergency court hearing 7 days later, she had evidence her stepmother never saw coming. And what unfolded in that courtroom changed everything. My name is Monica Mitchell. I'm 36 years old, and until 2 years ago, when my father passed away, I worked as a project coordinator for a tech consulting firm in San Francisco. After Dad died, I took a leave of absence to deal with the estate. A leave that turned permanent when I realized managing a $12 million trust fund required my full attention. I thought the hard part was over. I was wrong. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Victoria, my stepmother, left a voicemail asking me to come to the family estate in Pasadena for what she called a routine planning meeting about the trust. Her voice had that measured professional tone she'd perfected during her years as an attorney, warm enough to sound concerned, detached enough to make it clear this wasn't optional. I should have known something was wrong the moment I heard that tone. Victoria never did anything routine. I drove down from my apartment in Silver Lake, arriving at the estate around 2 in the afternoon. The house looked exactly as it had when I was growing up. Sprawling Spanish Revival architecture, perfectly maintained gardens, the kind of old money elegance that Dad had worked his entire life to afford. Victoria had redecorated after his death, of course, erasing most traces of my mother's taste and replacing them with cooler, more modern choices. Walking through that door always felt like stepping into someone else's home. What I saw in the dining room stopped me cold. This wasn't a family meeting. 2 men in expensive suits stood near the mahogany table, briefcases open, looking like they'd been there for a while. A third person, a woman with a notary stamp and seal visible on the table in front of her, was arranging papers into neat stacks. Documents were spread across the entire surface, each one flagged with bright yellow tabs marking signature lines. The whole setup screamed legal proceeding, not family discussion. Victoria appeared from the hallway dressed in one of her immaculate pantsuits, pearls at her throat. "Monica, thank you for coming," she said, gesturing to the table. "These are attorneys from Whitmore and Associates, and this is Miss Chen, our notary. We've prepared some documents that need your signature today." Today? I stayed in the doorway. "You said this was a planning meeting. What documents?" "For your protection, dear." Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Your father wanted to ensure the trust was managed responsibly. These forms establish a temporary conservatorship arrangement, just a precaution really, to make sure everything is handled properly until you turn 40 and assume full control." I moved closer to the table, scanning the papers. Medical power of attorney, trust amendment, temporary conservatorship arrangement. The name, Marcus Webb, appeared repeatedly. Victoria's personal attorney, someone I'd met exactly once at Dad's funeral. A conservatorship, that's for people who can't make their own decisions. It's completely standard for trusts of this size, one of the attorneys said, checking his watch for the 3rd time since I'd entered the room. Particularly when the beneficiary is young and the assets are complex. I'm 36, not exactly young, and I'd been managing my own finances since college, but I didn't argue. Instead, I pulled out a chair and started actually reading the documents. The trust amendment would grant Marcus Webb immediate decision-making authority over all distributions, investments, and asset management. It was effective upon my signature and would remain in place until I turned 44 years away. There was no oversight mechanism, no requirement for Webb to consult with me, no clear process for dissolving the arrangement if I wanted to. I need my own attorney to review this, I said. Victoria's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. Of course. Take your time. We have coffee. She nodded toward my mother, who I hadn't noticed standing near the sideboard. Linda, my biological mother who'd divorced my father when I was 15 and had barely spoken to me in the years since, brought over a silver tray with 3 porcelain cups. Her hands were shaking so badly the cups rattled against the saucers. She set them down without making eye contact, and that's when I knew something was deeply wrong. My mother had spent 20 years perfecting the art of appearing unaffected by everything. I'd never seen her hands shake. I picked up the coffee cup more out of habit than desire. The smell hit me immediately bitter acrid, not like the smooth Colombian blend the house usually stocked. I took a sip anyway, distracted by the clause I was reading about medical decision-making authority being transferred to the conservator. The coffee tasted as bad as it smelled. 5 minutes passed, maybe less. The words on the page started to blur slightly at the edges. My head felt heavy, like I hadn't slept in days, and there was a strange detachment settling over my thoughts. Not panic, just a vague sense that nothing really mattered very much. I should sign the papers. Victoria was probably right. This was all standard. My father would have wanted this. The door from the kitchen swung open. Rosa, the housekeeper who'd worked for the family for the past year, entered carrying a plate of cookies. She walked past the table and I watched her approach in slow motion, or at least it felt like slow motion. She stumbled, or seemed to stumble, and her hands shot out to steady herself against my chair. The movement knocked the coffee cup from my hand. Hot liquid splashed across the document, spreading in a brown stain that obliterated signature lines and legal text. Rosa was already grabbing napkins, wiping at the mess, leaning close to my ear. "Don't drink," she whispered so quietly, I almost thought I'd imagined it. Then louder, "Lo siento, señora. I'm so sorry. So clumsy." I looked up at Victoria. She should have been angry these were legal documents now ruined, requiring reprinting and renotarization. Instead, she just stood there with that same calm expression, already reaching for her phone. "No harm done, Rosa. Monica, why don't you rest in the library while I have fresh copies printed?" "You look pale." That's when I understood. Victoria had expected me to drink more. She'd planned for me to finish that cup, to sit at this table, growing progressively more agreeable and confused until I signed everything they put in front of me. Rosa's spill had been deliberate, and Victoria's lack of anger meant she knew it had worked at least partially. "I need to go," I heard myself say. The heavy feeling was getting worse, my thoughts increasingly difficult to grasp. "I want my own attorney to review everything before I sign anything." "Monica, that's really not," Victoria started. I was already standing, grabbing my purse, moving toward the door with concentration it shouldn't have taken. "I'll call you when I've had a chance to review with my lawyer." I made it to my car, hands trembling as I fumbled with the keys. The drive to the nearest urgent care clinic took 15 minutes, though I barely remember most of it. I kept both hands locked on the wheel, forcing myself to focus on the white lines of the freeway, on staying in my lane, on not letting the growing fog in my head take over completely. The urgent care doctor looked skeptical when I told him I thought someone had drugged me. "Do you have any proof of that, Ms. Mitchell?" "Just run the test," I said. "Please, something's wrong. That coffee tasted wrong, and now I feel wrong, and I need to know what was in it." He ordered a toxicology screen. I sat in the waiting room for 3 hours, watching the clock, drinking water from the cooler, trying to clear my head. By the time the nurse called me back, the worst of the fog had lifted, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity that felt almost worse. The doctor held a printout. You were right. Lorazepam and propranolol. Do you take these medications? No. What are they? Lorazepam is a benzodiazepine anti-anxiety medication. Propranolol is a beta blocker, typically used for blood pressure or performance anxiety. Together in the dosage we found in your system, they'd cause exactly what you described. Mental fog, reduced inhibitions, increased suggestibility. This combination is sometimes used before medical procedures to keep patients calm and cooperative. He paused. The levels aren't dangerous, but they're not accidental either. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. Do you want to file a police report? I thought about it. Victoria's lawyers, the notary, my mother shaking hands, the documents already prepared. Not yet. Can you just document everything in my medical records? I need copies of the test results. He printed everything, stapled it together, handed it over. Be careful, Miss Mitchell. Whoever did this was precise. That's scarier than someone who doesn't know what they're doing. I drove home as the sun was setting, hands steady now, mind racing. Victoria had tried to drug me into signing away my inheritance. No, not just my inheritance. My autonomy. My ability to make my own decisions. And she'd done it with medical precision, legal paperwork, and my own mother serving the poison. Sitting at my kitchen table, I opened my laptop and searched for Sarah Mitchell's death certificate. My aunt, my father's sister, had died 10 years ago, when I was 26, and living in San Francisco, too absorbed in my own life to pay much attention. The family said it was a tragic accident. She drowned in her bathtub after drinking too much wine. The certificate loaded on my screen. Cause of death, accidental drowning. Date, April 23rd, 2015. I scrolled down to the additional documentation, looking for something I'd never thought to look for before. There it was, attached to the file. A scanned copy of trust amendment papers signed by Sarah Mitchell the morning she died. The same kind of temporary conservatorship arrangement Victoria had wanted me to sign today. The same attorney's name, Marcus Webb. Victoria doesn't kill people. She just makes them sign their lives away first. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, Sarah's death certificate still glowing on the screen, and started going through my email inbox with new eyes. If Victoria had been planning this, there would be traces. There had to be. I found it in my spam folder the next morning, an email from Trust Administrator Services, dated 3 days before the family meeting. The subject line read, Confirmation of Psychiatric Evaluation Consent. My stomach dropped as I opened the attachment. It was a scanned document, official looking with medical letterhead, from Dr. Leonard Reeves, clinical psychologist. And there at the bottom was my signature authorizing Dr. Reeves to conduct a comprehensive mental capacity evaluation. I had never signed that document. I'd never even heard of Dr. Leonard Reeves. My hands were shaking as I dialed the number listed on the letterhead. A cheerful receptionist answered, Dr. Reeves' office, how may I help you? This is Monica Mitchell. I'm calling to confirm my appointment. Oh yes, Ms. Mitchell. We have you scheduled for next Tuesday at 2 o'clock, as arranged by your stepmother, Victoria Brennan. Dr. Reeves is looking forward to meeting with you. I hung up without responding. The room felt too small, suddenly the walls pressing in. Victoria hadn't just drugged me at that meeting. She'd been building a case for weeks, maybe months. The forged consent form meant she already had a psychiatric evaluation, scheduled one, that would presumably declare me mentally unstable, unable to manage my own affairs. If the coffee had worked and I'd signed those documents while drugged, Victoria would have her conservatorship. If I'd refused to sign, she had this backup plan ready, forced me into a psychiatric evaluation that would reach the same conclusion through different means. Either way, she won. This wasn't anger or revenge. This was systematic legal warfare with multiple contingencies planned in advance. I needed answers, and I knew exactly one person who might have them. Rosa had quit the morning after the coffee incident, or more accurately, she disappeared. The house phone went straight to voicemail when I called the estate. But I remembered her mentioning once that her sister lived in Van Nuys, near the plant nursery on Van Nuys Boulevard. It took 3 hours of driving through strip malls and residential streets before I spotted her coming out of a small house with peeling yellow paint. Rosa, wait, please. She froze on the sidewalk, then glanced back at the house like she wanted to run. Miss Monica, I can't talk to you. I have a son. I finally have my green card. I don't want any trouble. I just need to understand what happened. Why did you warn me? Something broke in her expression. She looked away, blinking hard. Because I didn't warn your aunt. And she died. The words hit me like cold water. You knew Sarah. I worked for her. 10 years ago, before I worked for Mrs. Victoria. I had a different last name than my maiden name. Mrs. Victoria. She didn't recognize me when she hired me last year. Rosa's voice dropped to barely a whisper. The week before Miss Sarah died, I saw Mrs. Victoria putting pills in her tea. I wanted to tell someone, but I was undocumented. Mrs. Victoria. She found out I saw, and she told me, if you say anything to anyone, I call immigration. Your son is 3 years old. You want him to lose his mother. So I stayed quiet. And then Miss Sarah drowned. Oh God, Rosa. I lived with that guilt every day for 10 years. But 6 months ago, I married Juan. He's a citizen, and I got my green card. When Mrs. Victoria hired me again, and I saw her making that coffee for you, the same way she made the tea for Miss Sarah, I couldn't stay silent again. I couldn't. Tears were running down her face now. Your aunt, she was a good woman. She knew something was wrong at the end. She left an envelope with her lawyer told me if anything happened to make sure you got it. His name is James Chen. He retired to Palm Springs. I found James Chen's address through the California State Bar website. The drive to Palm Springs took 2 hours, my mind racing the entire way. Chen lived in a modest ranch house with a carefully tended desert garden. He was in his 70s, silver-haired with sharp eyes that assessed me carefully when he opened the door. You're Monica Mitchell, he said. It wasn't a question. Rosa Delgado sent me. She said my aunt left something with you. He disappeared into his office and returned with a manila envelope sealed with tape that had yellowed with age. The label read, to be opened only if I die unexpectedly or if Monica Mitchell requests it. Inside was a letter in Sarah's handwriting describing months of pressure from Victoria to amend her trust. There were copies of the original trust documents. Sarah had been primary beneficiary of a different family trust with the same clause about being declared incapacitated before a certain age. There were medical records showing unexplained sedatives in her blood work from the week before she died, and there was a handwritten note on the back of an envelope. If you're reading this, Victoria didn't stop. Get an attorney she hasn't touched. Your aunt tried to change lawyers, Chen said quietly. But Victoria had already consulted with every estate attorney in LA County. Conflict of interest rules meant none of them could represent Sarah. That's when I knew she was in real danger. I told her to go to the police, but she said there was no proof, just suspicions. 3 days later, she was dead. He advised me to find an attorney from outside California, someone beyond Victoria's reach. I was driving back to Los Angeles. Sarah's envelope on the passenger seat beside me when my phone rang. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Monica, this is Dr. Leonard Reeves. I'm calling to confirm your psychiatric evaluation tomorrow at 2 p.m. Your stepmother mentioned you've been experiencing paranoid delusions. I'm here to help. I hung up without answering. Victoria knew I'd found something, and she wasn't waiting anymore. She was accelerating. I had maybe 48 hours before she made her next move. I needed a lawyer. I needed witnesses. I needed a plan. And I was starting from zero against someone who'd been planning this for months. I spent 9 days trying to find an attorney willing to take my case. 9 days of phone calls that all ended the same way. I'm sorry, Miss Mitchell, but we have a conflict of interest with your stepmother's representation. every estate attorney in Los Angeles County, every single one. Victoria had been thorough. On day 11, a process server knocked on my apartment door and handed me a thick envelope of legal documents. Emergency petition for temporary conservatorship. The words blurred together as I read. Victoria was asking the court to declare me a danger to myself due to psychiatric instability and paranoid delusions. The petition was 20 pages long, backed by exhibits that made my blood run cold. Exhibit A: the forged consent form for psychiatric evaluation with Dr. Reeves. Exhibit B: a statement from Dr. Reeves himself, claiming my failure to appear for scheduled evaluation indicates severe lack of insight into mental condition consistent with delusional disorder. Exhibit C: testimony from Linda. My own mother stating I'd been acting erratically, making wild accusations about family members, exhibiting signs of paranoid psychosis. Exhibit D: bank records showing I'd withdrawn $10,000 in cash. 2 days earlier, the money I'd paid James Chen for his time and expertise, but framed here as evidence of unstable secretive behavior. The hearing was scheduled for 7 days away. If the judge granted this petition, Victoria would have immediate control over every aspect of my life, my finances, my medical decisions, my ability to challenge anything she did. The conservatorship would remain in place for at least 45 to 60 days until a full hearing could be scheduled. By then, she'd have locked down everything. I called 17 more attorneys that afternoon. The 18th finally said yes. Richard Chen, no relation to James, practiced estate litigation in San Francisco. He had a track record of winning complex trust disputes and didn't recognize Victoria's name when I mentioned it. I drove to his office the next morning with everything the blood test results Sarah's envelope. Rosa's contact information. Copies of the forged documents. Richard was in his 40s, sharp-eyed and confident. He reviewed the materials for 2 hours, taking notes, asking precise questions. "This is winnable," he said finally. "We challenge the petition on procedural grounds. They're claiming emergency status without demonstrating actual emergency. We file a counter petition to remove Victoria from any trust-related capacity based on financial impropriety. We subpoena her records, depose Dr. Reeves about this evaluation he claims you missed, and we put Rosa on the stand to testify about what she saw." I paid his $15,000 retainer on the spot. For 3 days, Richard worked the case like a machine. He met with Rosa, spent hours reviewing trust documents, drafted motions that were sharp and aggressive. I started to believe I might actually survive this. Then on day 16 he called. "We need to talk, in person, right now." We met at a coffee shop in downtown LA. Richard looked like he hadn't slept. He slid an envelope across the table. My retainer check, all $15,000 returned. "I'm withdrawing from your case." "What? Why?" "This morning the state bar called me. Anonymous complaint about how I handled a case 3 years ago. Nothing serious, but if I continue representing you, they're going to open a formal investigation." He rubbed his face with both hands. "Yesterday my wife was in a car accident. Minor fender bender, other driver drove off, but he left a note on her windshield. Accidents happen when people don't know their place. Monica, I have 2 kids. I can't do this." I watched him leave the envelope with my returned money sitting on the table between us like evidence of my complete isolation. Victoria hadn't beaten Richard with legal arguments. She'd threatened his family. Back at my apartment, I opened my laptop to find a new email from an anonymous sender. No subject line. The message was brief. "You're alone now. Sign the papers at the hearing, and this ends quietly. Refuse, and we have other ways to solve problems. You saw what happened to Sarah. V." I had 2 days until the hearing. No attorney. Rosa had called that morning to say Victoria's people had shown up at her house, asking questions about her immigration status. Never mind that she had a green card. Now the intimidation worked. She couldn't testify. I was being systematically painted as paranoid and unstable, and anyone I tried to reach would see exactly what Victoria wanted them to see: a troubled woman making wild accusations against a concerned stepmother. Victoria had isolated me perfectly, using the law itself as her weapon. And I'd been playing defense the entire time, reacting to her moves instead of making my own. That stopped now. I made 3 phone calls that night. The first was to Janet Morse, a forensic accountant whose name I'd found through a legal database. I sent her every trust statement I had access to and told her to find anything irregular within 24 hours. The second call was to my college roommate in New York, who gave me a name: Professor William Harris, retired estate law professor from Columbia, now living in San Diego. The third call was to Professor Harris himself. I explained the situation in 10 minutes flat. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "This is the most brazen trust fraud I've heard in 40 years. I'll represent you, but Miss Mitchell, we only get 1 shot at this hearing. We'd better make it count." The morning of the hearing, my phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "It's not too late to avoid humiliation. Sign the conservatorship voluntarily. Keep your dignity." I didn't respond. Because I'd learned something from Victoria herself: the best predators don't announce their attacks. I walked into that courtroom with evidence she didn't know I had, and I was about to show her what happens when you underestimate someone you've cornered. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, with fluorescent lights that made everyone look slightly sickly. Victoria sat at the petitioner's table in a navy suit, her posture perfect, her expression the picture of concerned compassion. Martin Webb, her attorney, stood to present their case with the confidence of someone who'd never lost a hearing like this. He started with the forged psychiatric consent form, holding it up for the judge. "Your Honor, Ms. Mitchell signed authorization for a comprehensive mental health evaluation, then refused to attend. Dr. Leonard Reeves, a licensed clinical psychologist, reached out multiple times to schedule the court-ordered assessment, but Ms. Mitchell has refused all contact." It was never court-ordered, but the way Webb phrased it made it sound official, inevitable, like I'd defied some legal mandate, instead of simply ignoring a fake appointment I'd never agreed to. Then my mother took the stand. Linda looked smaller than I remembered, her eyes red from crying. "My daughter hasn't been herself," she said, her voice breaking. "She's been making these terrible accusations against Victoria, against me, saying we tried to hurt her. She needs help before she hurts herself. I'm terrified for her." I forced myself to stay still, to keep my expression neutral. This was the woman who'd raised me, who'd taught me to ride a bike and helped me study for the SATs. And she was sitting there lying under oath because Victoria had leverage over her. Dr. Reeves testified next, his voice smooth and professional. The patient's refusal to participate in a standard mental health evaluation indicates severe lack of insight, which is characteristic of delusional disorders. In my clinical opinion, temporary conservatorship would allow Ms. Mitchell to receive the treatment she needs in a safe, structured environment. Webb displayed the bank withdrawal of $10,000 on a screen, the number stark and damning. Ms. Mitchell withdrew this substantial sum in cash, refusing to explain the purpose to family members. This kind of secretive financial behavior often indicates paranoid ideation. He saved the best for last, looking at me with something that almost resembled pity. Miss Mitchell has accused her own family of attempting to poison her. She claims there's a conspiracy involving her late aunt's death from a decade ago. Your Honor, these are textbook paranoid delusions. This isn't about money or control. This is about a young woman who desperately needs help and refuses to accept it. Temporary conservatorship will protect her assets while ensuring she receives proper psychiatric care. Once stabilized, the arrangement can be dissolved. The judge looked at me with clear concern. I probably looked exactly how Victoria wanted me to look. Exhausted, stressed, like someone barely holding it together. Professor Harris stood slowly, his movements deliberate. Your Honor, this isn't a mental health case. This is attempted trust fraud, and we can prove it. He laid out the blood test results first, the medical documentation, stark and undeniable. These tests were taken 3 hours after the family meeting, where Miss Mitchell was supposed to sign trust documents. They show lorazepam, and propranolol in her system, neither prescribed to her. The urgent care physician's notes described the dosage as consistent with pre-procedure sedation to induce compliance. Someone drugged Miss Mitchell on the same day she was supposed to sign away control of her inheritance. That's not paranoia, Your Honor. That's attempted fraud. Webb objected immediately. Speculation. There's no proof of who administered any substances. Rosa walked to the witness stand like she was walking to her own execution. Her hands clasped tight in her lap. But when Harris asked her what she'd seen, her voice was steady. She described watching Victoria prepare the coffee, described the deliberate spill, described whispering the warning. Webb tore into her on cross-examination, bringing up her immigration history, the 10-year gap, suggesting she had ulterior motives. Rosa didn't flinch. I was scared then. I'm not scared now. I know what I saw. Harris introduced Sarah's medical records, next showing the same unexplained sedatives in her blood work the week before she drowned. He presented her documentation of Victoria's pressure to amend trust documents, the sealed envelope she'd left with James Chen. Webb objected that Sarah's death had been investigated and ruled accidental. Harris met his eyes. It establishes a pattern of conduct, Your Honor. Then Janet Morse took the stand. The forensic accountant had worked through the night, and it showed in her presentation, precise, devastating, impossible to dismiss. She testified about 47 fraudulent withdrawals from the trust over the past 3 years, totaling $340,000, all marked as property maintenance, all signed off on by Victoria as trustee. I personally visited each address listed, Janet said. 2 are vacant lots. 3 don't exist at all. The rest are residential properties with absolutely no connection to the trust. The courtroom went very quiet. I watched Victoria's face remain completely neutral, but her hands clenched, white-knuckled in her lap. The judge sat back in his chair silent for what felt like an eternity. Then he spoke. I'm denying the emergency petition. Miss Brennan's concerns about Miss Mitchell's mental state appear to be unfounded or worse, fabricated. The evidence of financial irregularities is deeply concerning. I'm ordering a full forensic audit of the trust and referring this matter to the district attorney's office for investigation of potential criminal conduct. Webb shot to his feet. Your Honor, we'll be filing an... You may file whatever you wish, counsel, but this emergency petition is denied, and that ruling stands. Victoria walked past me in the courthouse hallway without looking at me. But she whispered as she passed, This isn't over. You just made this personal. I turned to face her. It was always personal. You tried to drug me. Prove it. Then she was gone. That evening, a FedEx envelope arrived from Linda. Inside was a handwritten note. I'm sorry. Victoria had proof of your father's affairs. She threatened to release everything if I didn't testify. I thought it wouldn't really hurt you. I was wrong. She has recordings of me from after your father died saying terrible things about you. She's planning to leak them. Be ready. That night, an email arrived from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, I was supposed to be next. The message was brief. My name is Catherine Pierce. Victoria Brennan was my stepmother 30 years ago. She did to my father what she tried to do to you. I have evidence. We need to talk. There are more of us. I met Catherine Pierce 3 days later at a quiet restaurant in Pasadena. She was 48, impeccably dressed with the kind of careful composure that comes from years of keeping secrets. We didn't waste time on small talk. She slid a folder across the table before the waiter had even brought our water. My father married Victoria when I was 12, Catherine said. He died of a heart attack when I was 18. Except it wasn't just a heart attack. He had dizzy spells for weeks before confusion moments where he didn't seem like himself. And 3 days before he died, he signed a new will, making Victoria the primary beneficiary instead of me. The hospital records she'd brought showed unexplained medication in her father's system before his death. Letters to his attorney mentioned growing concerns about Victoria's influence over his decisions. And then the detail that made my stomach drop: the doctor who'd evaluated her father's diminished capacity before he signed that will was Dr. Leonard Reeves. The same doctor who'd tried to evaluate me. There was another woman too, Catherine continued. Jennifer Caruso. She was engaged to Victoria's second husband before Victoria married him instead. Jennifer died in an accidental fall 3 years into their marriage, right after she refused to sign a prenuptial waiver Victoria had drawn up. The police never investigated. Victoria knew how to make things look clean. 3 victims over 30 years. Same methods, same compromised professionals, same pattern of control disguised as concern. The DA, Rebecca Torres, met with both of us the following week. She reviewed everything: Catherine's evidence, my case. Sarah's reopened investigation. I can file charges, she said. Grand theft, elder, abuse forgery. But this is a complex conspiracy case spanning 3 decades. Building it properly will take 12 to 18 months, and Victoria has the resources to fight every step. 30 days after the emergency hearing, the full trust litigation concluded. Janet Morse's complete forensic audit had found even more than the initial review. $470,000 embezzled over 3 years. Trust funds used for Emma's private college tuition. Victoria's personal legal fees, donations to charitable foundations that turned out not to exist. The judge's ruling was comprehensive trust fraud, confirmed all documents signed in my name over the past 2 years. Voided Victoria removed from any role related to the trust, ordered to repay the full amount, plus my legal fees. Control transferred to me immediately. Victoria filed an appeal that same afternoon and posted a $600,000 bond, but the transfer of control happened regardless. I changed everything new. Trust administrator, different bank security protocols. Victoria couldn't touch. But she was still practicing law. No criminal charges had been filed yet. Her reputation was damaged, but she wasn't destroyed. I didn't celebrate because I understood. A wounded animal is the most dangerous kind. I made my decision that week. I would testify when the DA needed me, but I wasn't staying in California to watch Victoria's slow-motion collapse. I moved to Portland, took a job with an estate planning firm that found my experience with trust fraud uniquely valuable, and kept minimal contact with California, except for regular calls with Professor Harris. 3 months after I left the state bar, opened a formal investigation into Victoria's conduct. Her law firm asked her to take a temporary leave of absence. Legal blogs picked up the story. Victoria's social circle began the quiet retreat that happens when scandal touches someone. Lunch invitations, stopped calls, went unreturned board positions, politely requested her resignation. 4 months after my court victory, the DA filed criminal charges. Grand theft, elder abuse, 17 counts of forgery. No murder charge. There wasn't enough evidence to prove Sarah's death was anything but accidental, no matter how suspicious the circumstances. Victoria posted $1 million bail and walked out of the courthouse into a wall of cameras, hiring a defense team that immediately filed motions to dismiss. Emma, Victoria's daughter, released a public statement cutting all contact with her mother and renouncing any claim to trust assets. Linda moved to Arizona and disappeared from the story entirely. Victoria gave an interview to the Los Angeles Times, maintaining her innocence, calling it all accounting errors and misunderstandings. But public opinion had already shifted. The trial date was set for 14 months away. 6 months after I'd left California, Rebecca Torres emailed me. Trial set for next spring. 4 potential victims have come forward after reading about the charges. You started something, Monica. This pattern is finally breaking. I didn't reply to the email. I just closed my laptop and looked out at the rain falling on Portland's streets. Victoria would go to trial eventually. Maybe she'd be convicted, maybe not. Rich people with expensive lawyers often avoid prison. But her empire was already crumbling, one lost client and one damaged relationship at a time. I'd learned something from Victoria. You don't need to destroy someone loudly. You just need to make sure that when they fall, everyone is watching. That coffee Rosa spilled was supposed to make me compliant enough to sign away my future. Instead, it woke me up to what Victoria really was. Sometimes the best revenge isn't what you do to someone, it's what you don't let them do to you. I survived. Victoria's pattern didn't. And that was enough. Monica's story reminds us of something powerful. Trust your instincts even when everyone tells you you're wrong. Rosa's whisper saved Monica's life because Monica chose to listen to that small voice of warning instead of dismissing it. The most important lesson here isn't just about fighting back against betrayal. It's about knowing that you have the right to protect yourself, to set boundaries, and to walk away from people who harm you even if they're family. You're never too old, never too late, and never too alone to stand up for yourself. If Monica's story resonated with you, please subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss these powerful true stories. Leave a comment below telling us what you would have done in Monica's situation. Would you have trusted Rosa's warning? Would you have fought back or walked away? Your story matters. We're listening. Thank you for watching.